Will it come to that? Let's ask former Verizon Wireless CEO Denny Strigl. Denny, good to have you.
Nice to be here, Neil.
Will it come to that?
I think the burden of proof is with the Department of Justice on this. And I think it'll be a tough case to prove in court. They're talking about stifling innovation, raising prices, eliminating competition. That's all.
Because this is all a vertical merger, right?
It's a vertical merger. It's not horizontal. These are not competing companies. And there is no reason, at least in my mind, why this shouldn't be allowed. Comcast, NBC Universal was allowed a few years ago, I guess 2011. There was a side agreement with the Department of Justice that they would behave in certain ways. And by the way, if that's not what's happening, and if they're not behaving that way, Justice has all kinds of alternatives.
Well, isn't that the rap on that merger, that they aren't behaving that way?
Well,
they haven't come back?
I have read various things that says they aren't. But Justice should hold their feet to the fire on this. And they can do the same with AT&T with some kind of behavioral side agreement.
How much of this, Denny, is coming from the president, you suspect? Not a fan of CNN. But my cynical view on that, whether you argue that he wanted to interfere in this or not, which would be very obvious if that were the case, some say it is, it's not as if CNN isn't going to find plenty of interested bidders. So it's not as if you would be killing off CNN if you had to detach it from this thing, right?
Well, here's the downside of AT&T's having to sell CNN. It would be sold at a fire sale price.
You think so?
This happens all the time.
Really?
When divestiture has to occur, when it's ordered, it usually goes at much less than what the true value is. And that probably is one of the things AT&T would be afraid of if that happens.
Because AT&T could always entertain selling that off once the merger is complete anyway, just for its own
of course.
benefit, right?
They could always do that, of course.
Yeah, just like GE de-wed itself of a lot of broadcast properties with before the formal
Exactly.
sale, right?
Exactly. One of the things that concerns me very much about Justice's action here is we have Google and we have Facebook, which are huge, huge companies.
Right.
And we have AT&T, who would like to compete with these two companies through this acquisition. Why wouldn't we let them do that?
We're always caught, like I was showing my age before with this young crew down here. I remember Netscape. It was the threat to the world. It was going to be this internet behemoth. You couldn't let it even entertain buying other properties or just being a standalone entity in Europe. Now I talk to kids and they say, Net who? Who is it? Yeah. And yet at the time, at Snapshot at the time, they were the monster. They were the behemoth. Just like there was a time IBM was the behemoth before Microsoft. And Microsoft was the behemoth before, well, Apple and everybody else. My point
That's exactly right.
Be careful what you worry about because there are greater worries down the road, right?
Oh, I think that's precisely right, Neil. The issue that we have with this AT&T deal is, from AT&T's point of view, if it does end up going to a lawsuit, AT&T is threatened by loss of employees at Time Warner, by loss of revenues, by loss of customers. The longest this goes out, the more the business itself may atrophy.
Because it's been a year.
So that's a concern for AT&T. So Randall Stevenson and team, they want to get this thing done as quickly as they can. Justice, I think, wants to get this off their plate and move on. Justice said they would be willing to talk about settlement. I think that clearly that should happen.
You think the deal in the end goes through?
I think the deal in the end goes through. In my mind, Neil, I think there's very little doubt.
Yeah, I think you're right. The tax battle back and forth, a lot of people are wondering what corporations do if they get their tax cut, the big one from 35 to 20. And that Democrats are warning they better not just plow it back into their stock or raise dividends. They're free to do with their money what they want to do. I understand that. But do you think that would be a problem for Republicans if that's what they do, if all they do is just plow it right back into
I think if that's all they do, it would be a problem for Republicans. But I don't think that that's what they will do. I think there are plenty of places that companies can invest. Capital expenditures, I think they have been stifled over the last several years. There are companies that want to spend. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
But they could initially start spending on buying out competitors, right? So you could conceivably, short term, be having people losing jobs, right?
It's possible, Neil. It's possible. And in any large acquisition, there will always be some downsizing. Yeah. But, because of the savings that are involved in consolidating staffs. But I don't see that as the biggest threat that comes out of decreasing tax rates. I think it makes American companies much more competitive worldwide. And I think it also will help with capital investment, I think, largely.
Do you think the president, by going after a senator, by going after a UCLA player's father, gets distracted on the message and that hurts his chances of focusing on this?
I wish he wouldn't have done that. I don't think it makes any difference the way the individual's father feels. Yeah, it is a bit distracting. If not necessarily for the president, I think it causes others who see him do that to be distracted or to be disappointed by it.
If he loses on this, or Republicans lose on this, then what?
I don't think they'll lose on this.
Really?
I don't. I honestly don't think they'll lose on this. This is something that I think many on both sides of the aisle understand, whether they vote for it or not, understand that this needs to be done, if not now, if not just after Thanksgiving, soon.
Yeah. No, they know what's at stake. Certainly Republicans do. We'll watch what happens. Denny Strigl, former Verizon Wireless CEO.